Hi, this is Ken Adams, your host for the Valley View, and this week's edition we're going to be talking to Michele Darr. And you might have seen Michele biking around town with her bicycle cab.
Yeah.
And so I've been always curious about who rides bikes and how do you get started running a business where you bike people around downtown and wherever. So welcome to the show, Michele.
Thank you, Ken. It's great to be here.
So how did you get started with biking? What draws you to biking as a way of living?
I've always enjoyed biking. I grew up, out in the country, and that was one of my favorite things to do was ride my bicycle, and so I had that love. Although getting into it as a mode of transportation came about somewhat out of necessity, but also out of passion and wanting to put some of my beliefs into action.
Came out of necessity?
Yes. I actually broke my leg in two places.
Okay.
And I realized, I had gotten very much overweight and had, there were certain aspects of my life that could really, I needed to overhaul the way I was, interacting with my body. And so I knew it was important to, have some kind of exercise regimen, but that it had to be, really fun and engaging and something I believed in. And so I started bicycling. I sold my car and started bicycling. And then I realized just, how powerful of a statement it was making, and I started to make connections with people, out in the community. And I was particularly impacted by a group that rode their bicycles from Arcata, California, all the way up to Seattle, Washington. And it was a group of Veterans for Peace, led by S. Brian Wilson, who's a double amputee, Vietnam veteran. And he just inspired me so much. I thought, this is something.
You can do it.
Absolutely. And I had three, children at home at the time, 4 children, excuse me. And they were all very small, and so it took some creativity and thinking about how we could do it. But I was able to transport the entire family around just using my 2-wheel bicycle and bike trailers at the time. I didn't have bicycle cabs back then.
Right. But I mean, okay, so you had how many kids?
Well, I have 7.
Well, but I mean,
altogether.
when you took this bicycle trip,
Yes, I took 3 of them along with me.
And they were young.
They were very young. Okay, so we're getting into the journey part of it.
Yeah.
S. Brian Wilson inspired me so much that I decided to plan a cross-country trip going from Corvallis, Oregon to Washington, D.C. And I wanted to take my children with me, and I thought, this is a really powerful opportunity to get out there and see the country firsthand and experience it firsthand and experience talking to people from different walks of life. And it was interesting in the planning of the route. A lot of my friends were, expressing some fear and trepidation at me taking, the message of peace and sustainability, which is what S. Brian Wilson was carrying and what I wanted to carry forth as well. They told me that there are places in the country where that message wouldn't be accepted, where people would, be outright hostile, and where I might, have reason to, fear to tread in certain places. And I looked at my kids and I thought, there's no way I could. There's always something to connect with people on.
Right.
And so in taking my whole family out on the road, I took that gamble, that I was right about that there wasn't any boogeyman up the road waiting to, harm me based upon this message, which is a message based in love. And the way that we went about talking to people and making connections in communities across the United States was just incredibly transformative, even though, I went with the firm assumption that people were good at their core, and that there was always something we could connect on, and there was no subject that was off limits when you came from a place of love.
Well, it's interesting too, because I remember when I was about 19, I went down through the Old South, and people had been warning me, that it was still. This was in the mid-60s, actually.
Yeah.
And people were saying it was still really segregated, and, it wasn't probably a place for a long-haired hippie. But I went anyway.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I noticed, especially in the South, especially at that time, you had people that sat on their porches.
Yeah.
And if you're biking or walking, it's easy to have a conversation with them.
Exactly.
And, even though you look different, and you're one of those hippies from California or whatever, they still engage you.
Yes.
And as long as you're not defensive, that you just talk to them normally, you usually don't have a problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I remember when I was in college, I had a psych professor tell me that it takes 1 year for somebody to change their mind, or 5 years for somebody to change their mind. Mm-hmm. And so I used to do a lot of tabling at peace events and like that. And so it rattled around my brain, and finally I decided I need to find out where these people are on that journey.
Yeah.
Are they on day one, or are they someplace else? And so like I would listen to them. You know, I'd ask them questions about, you know, if they were arguing with me or having,
Right.
you know, more heated discussions.
Right.
I would ask them, you know, questions because I was trying to figure out where they were. And, you know, it created a really interesting dynamic because I was so intent on listening to them and trying to figure out where they were coming from and asking them questions back that when I talked, they then listened.
Yes.
You know, it wasn't just sloganeering at somebody. And,
Right.
and that's, I think, what you were seeing is, especially on a bicycle or walking, you're going at a speed that's human speed.
Yes, exactly.
And you have time to
Exactly.
talk to people and like that.
Right.
And
And,
so,
and with the children were such powerful ambassadors, and they were, you know, so exuberant to be along on the trip. My twins were just 1.5 at the time, and so I carted them behind me in a bicycle trailer. And then I took my 11-year-old, who turned 12 on the journey, and my twins turned 2 in Washington, D.C. And it was just amazing the way they were able to reach people. We were able to have what I felt like heart-to-heart discussions without saying a word. Because we would look at one another, and because there were people that would, you know, come racing up because they'd see the signs and they were like, you know, what the heck is going on? And they would take a look at what was in the bike trailer. And it was like this communication happened with no words at that point. And then it would always go to, what are you doing? What is
Right.
this message about? Why is this so important to you?
and I think it's good for the children too.
Yeah.
Because then they see you interacting with people that have different points of view,
Yeah.
but you're able to have the discussion and maybe, I think they get a lot of really good information that way about seeing how their parents work.
Yeah.
You know, and that really is work. You know, and like a lot of times, you know, like I usually worked in cubicles or, you know,
Yeah.
other things like that, and the kids didn't usually get to see me work or interact with
Yeah.
other folks. And I think that's a very valuable thing that we've lost, basically.
Sure.
I mean, when you were farming, you know, when most of the population was farming, your kids would be helping you out there in the fields and
Yes.
like that.
Yes.
And I think it's important for kids to see examples of how their family interacts with others so that they have a
Right.
good basis for how
Right.
to interact with others as well.
Yeah. And that they understand that the basis of all communication, the most effective communication, comes from the heart. And so therefore there's always something to connect on. Those babies were always something that I could connect on. I could always, you know, despite, you know, all of the sloganry and the, you know, differing points of view, what was really important didn't even really need to be spoken. And yet it was. We would always come around to, you know, people wanting to know why we were taking a journey of this magnitude. And I said, because I want to know what people love in this country. What is important to you? What kinds of connections are you willing to make with one another to, you know, start to divert from some of these courses that are, you know, taking us down a road that none of us really want to go down. Because we rode through cities where the entire population was cleared out of its young men. They were, you know, all on, you know, their God knows how many multiple deployments. And it would literally, across the South, there were towns where there were no young men left in town, where there were yellow flags, yellow ribbons everywhere, flags everywhere, memorials everywhere.
Yeah, and these are quite often, especially in these small towns, they're quite often the police and the fire and the emergency responders.
Yes, I heard that too.
And so that is really, you know, I've heard about this from friends of mine that have visited recently, and they said it's heartbreaking because some of these towns don't have enough young people to kind of sustain the town.
Right, and such few opportunities that they feel that the military is a viable opportunity, the only viable opportunity, and so many of them in those impoverished communities join up. And so that was another thing we discussed, is community endeavors and how communities can support one another so that people don't feel like there's only one option available to them. You know, how can we network and build our communities more cooperatively, which is what, you know, led us into, you know, when I decided to get into bicycling, you know, as a business and got the pedicabs, one of the first things I thought of was, that journey was so profoundly impactful in how I communicate with people. And the communicating with people was the most important thing to me. And so that's why from the beginning we've maintained this policy of not setting any prices for riding with us, because the most important thing is that you get in and you experience Salem's history, Salem's present, and Salem's potential future. And visit some of those
pace.
at a human pace, yes, as we're riding around and connecting people with a sense of place, with a sense of where they live and what's beautiful, what there is to love here, the people, certainly our environment.
Yeah, I mean, I started, I biked when I was a kid. I had a paper route and everything, and I loved biking, but I always kind of thought of it not as a mode of transportation, but as just, a kid thing. So at some point I quit biking, because I got a car and I started driving. And I remember that I moved back to Connecticut for a while, and I was trying to get by just on one car. And my wife was using that to go to work, and I figured, I just sit around all day.
Yeah.
I can walk to work. And then I thought, well, I could bike. That'd be even better,
Yeah, more fun, engaging.
It was kind of like, you realized how far you can bike.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a bike racer. You can just go to whatever pace feels comfortable.
Yeah, exactly, and you can talk to everybody along the way.
And, sometimes dogs would chase you.
Then there's
But, I found out that I was, I was recovering from, I've always had problems with my knees because of playing football.
Sure.
But I realized that, wait, I don't have to outrun them, I just outbike them,
Yeah.
And sometimes, if there was too many of them, I'd get off and talk to them, and usually that would
Sure.
settle things down. But it was very, I don't know, it was kind of like a release knowing that I can bike.
Yes.
I can bike long distances.
Yeah.
I don't need the car to go to Waterbury or Hartford. I can bike there.
Yeah.
And like when the kids came along, I started biking them over to the babysitters and then biking to work. And I think that was also a good thing for the kids to see that you don't have to have a car.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know that my son, who lives in Los Angeles, gets around mostly on public transportation himself.
Yeah.
And he's a lawyer. He could afford a nice car. He doesn't. He gets one that if he has to go to a court someplace, that's a little bit further, then he can take the car.
Yeah.
But for the most part, he's learned how to use public transportation and other methods for getting around. And my daughter's kind of the same way. Well, usually she tries to get a job where she doesn't have to commute.
Right.
Which I think is probably the best solution of all.
Right.
So you came to Salem how? Have you always you moved here, you were talking about Arcata to Seattle, so you must have lived in Northern California?
No, I lived in Corvallis.
Oh,
the journey
okay.
went from Arcata, the journey that Brian and Vets for
Okay.
Peace took was from Arcata to Seattle, and they passed through Corvallis on the
Oh,
way
okay,
up.
so you joined them on the way.
Actually, I didn't join them. I hosted them as they were coming through Corvallis,
see.
and because they were on a speaking tour, and they were telling people what they were doing, which is what we were doing when we did our journey as well, was to talk to people and organize as many events as we could to actually talk to groups of people. But it didn't happen a whole lot. A lot of ours was kitchen table with people we met along the way, and it was the same with Brian. So we hosted Brian and Vets for Peace in Corvallis, and that's how I met him. And in terms of Salem, I went to junior high and high school here, so
Oh, okay.
Judson and Sprague. And so Salem's always felt like home to me. I keep coming back, and I've done a lot my share of traveling, but I keep coming back to Salem, the city of peace, the city where my heart is. I love it here.
Well, it's interesting how people end up where they do, and there's, I've traveled a lot throughout the United States. When I was young, my dad moved around the various jobs, and even as I was an adult, I moved around a lot. And there's two places I always feel comfortable, and that's Oregon and New England. I don't know why that is, but those are two places where I always feel really comfortable. And I've been trying to talk my wife for years, like 30 or more, into moving to Oregon. And finally, she came up here and did an event over in Corvallis. And she says, it is really beautiful up there.
Yeah.
And so, I
Well, that's a
finally
place to
managed. It
sell
took
you.
a while, but, but she really enjoys it now. One of the things, too, is that it stays green all year. When
Yeah,
you're living in
that's
California,
true.
that's not always what happens.
Yeah.
Come May, it starts getting brown. They
Yeah.
call it gold, but I call it brown. But it does feel comfortable. And Salem is a city that, you know, it's big enough that, you know, you can go do things and like that. And but you don't really have traffic. I know people complain about it, but it's nothing
Right.
to speak of. And
That's true.
and we picked a place that was downtown so that we could walk or bike places
Yeah.
that we didn't have to drive. And it came in really handy during that big snowstorm we had a few weeks ago, because we were able to
too.
walk to the grocery store. And
Yes.
you know, one of the interesting things too about that was that a lot of people were walking to the store out in the middle of the street, you know, because most of the streets, no cars were coming down anyway. But everybody was talking to each other, you know, because we're all walking. We're not driving by each other in
Yeah.
cars.
What an amazing thing.
Yeah, and I felt really enlivened by the fact that everybody was talking and having a good time, even though, you know, it's taking us longer to get there and longer to get back. But you know what? Everybody seemed to be in such a really good mood.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it gave us a chance to slow down and connect more with each other and, you know, life in general.
Yeah.
Just everything slowed down, and that's a good thing to do every so often.
And so, you know, I see you bicycling around town with, you know, people in the back. And so who does like to take bicycle cabs? Is it just something that people try out on a whim, or do you have like regular customers? How does that work?
Everything. This is my 5th year now, and so there are people just from every demographic, and it just, you know, depends on often the weather. We do have full enclosures for the cabs, which keep the passengers warm and dry. When
not
it
you.
snows, not. Yeah, but you know, I'm immune. I just
okay.
the weather doesn't bother me. I've got my gear, and so I'm good. But so people like to take rides when the weather's inclement sometimes, but really most people enjoy it on a sunny day. And so that's when we do a lot of rides, and we go to the park, we go around town, we do give people rides to appointments. We do a lot of weekend service because the city transit
Doesn't
we don't
function
have
on the weekends.
Right, exactly. And so we're one
okay.
of the options that people can use to get around, no matter what they have to do, or if they just want to take a scenic tour or a historic tour. There's so many ways that.
So if they wanted to go grocery shopping, there's enough room in the cab
Oh,
for their
yeah,
groceries
yeah.
and themselves.
Right, yeah. The cab can carry up to 1,000 pounds, and we've definitely done that and more, so you can do the math. We put several people
okay.
back there. Comfortably, about 3 people, you know.
No more,
can
yeah.
sit. Well, we have done more.
Oh,
but,
okay.
but comfortably, I said, without, you know,
okay.
acrobatics. So, anyway,
I'll just have to imagine
roughly
that.
3 people, but 1,000 pounds, that's the benchmark. And so we can, I've helped people move. They're, you know,
okay.
whole houses, apartments, you know, with creative placing of furniture and all.
Oh, okay.
So we're actually pretty versatile.
Well, that's interesting, because I didn't even know all that. I mean, I
yeah.
just see you biking around with people in the back, and you know,
Yeah.
like you were saying, in inclement weather, you have like an enclosure so that they're not getting wet.
Exactly. We were out in that big snowstorm. Yeah.
Well, you were one of the few. I parked my car and didn't drive again
Yeah.
because I just felt it was too unsafe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well,
most
we were
of the
giving-
roads weren't plowed.
Yeah, that's true. We were giving a lot of rides to people who wanted to do that, just park their car and take a slower mode of transportation.
Now, one of the things I noticed when I was bicycling to work in Connecticut was sometimes the brakes don't work real good in those icy conditions.
Oh.
So
Mine did. I have hydraulic disc brakes in the
oh,
back.
okay.
and
Oh, so you got fancy brakes.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, you don't just have the okay.
Yeah, right.
So, but you know, it was interesting too. Like I would bike all year in Connecticut, you know, and you
Yeah.
get snow. And I remember one time in particular that it snowed the first week in October, and it was a wet snow, and I got to work. I was pretty wet and like that. And everybody was in a really bad mood because they thought, oh no, it's winter already. Next week it was 90 degrees. You
Oh,
know?
wow.
So, but I mean,
How's
being
that?
outside
Yeah.
is
It's invigorating.
it is, and I mean, I would always come to work in a good mood, and
Exactly.
and then like whatever tension or whatever would build up during the work day would be gone by the time I biked home.
It's those endorphins.
Yes,
It's good
well,
medicine.
I didn't know what it was. I just know that whatever tension I had was gone.
Yeah,
And I was maybe 15 minutes away at tops. You know,
it's good medicine, that's
it
for
is.
sure.
It is. And of course, it would have been nice when I worked in Sacramento if they had had shower facilities, because I would be pretty sweaty when I came in, because I would go in at 4 in the afternoon and it would be like 100 degrees or something. And so, yeah, I would have appreciated a shower when I got there. I'm sure my coworkers probably would have appreciated it too. But yeah, I was really kind of happy when I really discovered that biking you can think of as transportation, not just some sort of kids endeavor.
Yes, absolutely.
And I remember for a while I wasn't biking, and a friend of mine had his bike stolen, so I gave him my bike. And after a few weeks I said, well, I know I'm not biking as much, but I feel inhibited because I don't have the availability of a bike.
Right.
And you know, it's so much easier if you, a lot of times, like some of the shorter trips that you make, they're easily done on bike.
Yeah.
And I have like little carriers, so if I go over to the grocery store, you know, I can easily put my groceries in there.
Yeah, exactly. Bicycles are very versatile now more than ever. You know, there are many, many, many different makes and models, and just almost space age looking contraptions out there that are just fantastically useful and utilitarian.
You know, I remember reading a book, and this had to be sometime in the 80s, and it talked about miles per hour. But take into consideration how much time you spend buying and keeping the vehicle up.
Yes.
And they calculated that, you know, if you bought a new car and were paying it off, you were probably going somewhere between 6 and 9 miles per hour when you counted in the hours it took you to buy the vehicle.
Wow.
And I don't know about you, but I can easily bike 6 to 9 miles an hour quite easily. I mean, people can walk generally 3.5, maybe even 4 miles an hour if they're really in good shape. And so you're not gaining much. You know, if you count the time it takes you to pay for the car.
Right.
And bicycling, normally, when I was biking, I'd usually get about 10 or 12 miles per hour. So that's considerably more than a car.
Yeah, and then you can factor in health insurance because you're certainly healthier when you bike, and so you're saving money on just like so many levels, and like increasing your quality of life because of all of the ways that you get to experience things firsthand, up close and personal, and not blocked off and, you know, cubicled off in one more place in life, you know.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a concern. I think that's kind of how we've lost connections with others in our community.
Yeah, I agree
and I've lived in communities where people are gone all day, and then the garage door goes up, they drive in, and you never see them again.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've seen that in like suburban settings, and it's really kind of heartbreaking.
It is.
And like, since I live downtown, I see tons of people walking and biking, and if I'm sitting out on my porch, I can easily, you know, talk to them, and you know, sometimes people need help.
Yeah.
You know, and there's been a few times where there's been somebody that's obviously having some sort of issue, and you can go up and you need some help or something.
Yeah, right.
And that's completely missing if you're driving by in a car.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It really fosters a connection. It's another way that we can foster connection.
So you've been doing this bike cab business here in Salem for about 5 years. And I take it that it's been successful and for you.
Yeah.
It meets your needs as far as...
It certainly meets my needs. My needs are always met. And I'm so grateful to be living this dream. It's such a wonderful feeling to be able to do what, you know, my heart calls me to do in a way that it calls me to do it. And to have the opportunity to get out there and to continue that bicycle journey that I, you know, kicked off in 2007, and to be able to continue to interact with people in the community the way I learned to interact in communities across the country, and to really be able to, you know, share that very basis of what connects us all, and it's all in the heart. So therefore it lies out there beyond our words and beyond our differences in opinion, and that's, I believe, where true peace is made, is in that common space that we all share, that we all have, that peace that is non-negotiably human.
And so, now, like, you started this, and you were there any other people doing this when you started?
No, me and I started it with a biking partner, and 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And we still don't have anybody else in the community who's doing that, although I really would love to see a day when these are like all over the place. And I'm certainly doing my part because we're
Yeah.
investing in new equipment all the time. We're up at 3 cabs. We have 3 cabs
Oh,
right
okay.
now. We're expanding to 5. We've gotten some new sponsorships, and so we're going to be expanding again here really soon, and then getting into delivery. And yeah, just really showing people the various ways in which bicycles can meet their needs, particularly in the business realm and in the realm of transportation.
So how many hours a week, say, do you do this?
Oh, well, we start at about 9 o'clock every morning, and we can go sometimes as late as midnight.
Oh, wow.
You know, so our hours are variable and depend upon, you know, what people's needs are. And so.
But you have downtime during certain times of
I
the
do.
day.
Well, I have other drivers that help
Yeah.
with that. So that's where
Oh,
the
okay.
downtime comes in. The first 2 years, there was no downtime.
Well, that could
So
that could
it's
be
kind of nice
yeah.
as it expands and other people get involved.
So you'd be looking for full-time bike cab drivers?
Yeah, yeah, particularly with spring and summer coming on. Yeah, for sure.
You could even have part-time?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
People come in and they work whatever hours they like to work, and they get to keep their money. We don't charge a leasing fee. We just, you know, allow people to take the equipment out and give rides as they see fit. You know, go out and hang out and, you know, earn a living, and which is particularly doable in the spring and summer months, like I said, when our services are very much in demand. So.
Now, you know, it just brought up something in my mind anyway about people who have maybe had a bit too much to drink and need a ride home.
Oh yeah, that's our story every weekend.
Oh really? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, that's definitely one of our demographics. So that use our
Interesting.
services.
Oh,
so.
okay. Well, boy, this is bringing up lots of things that I hadn't even thought about or contemplated,
Yeah.
you know, when I saw that. But
So many uses for bicycles and bicycle transportation, and ways in which we can serve that people don't think about until they're like, hey, I need to ride somewhere. And never would have thought I'd ride in that, but hey, let's do it. Let's try it out.
Well, this is kind of exciting, I think. At least for me it is. I don't know.
Definitely, I
that,
think so.
that people can see this going on, and as you get more bicycles, I'm sure it'll start really getting into their mind, especially with the parking situation downtown.
Yes, very much so, yeah. There's a big demand for our services in downtown. That's probably our most busy, you know, area right now. Although Lancaster's starting to pick up,
Oh,
so
okay.
putting bikes out there as well. Different quadrants of town. I'd like to see bicycles everywhere, and so
Well, I would
my
too.
goal is to just add those whenever I can.
Well, Michelle, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank
This
you,
has been a
Ken.
really, actually, enlightening show for me. So
Me
I want
too.
to thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
And I want to invite you back next week for the Valley View, and we'll see you then.
Okay.